Awareness, the final frontier. This is Awareness Explorers.
Welcome back, fellow explorers, to Awareness Explorers. I'm your co-host, Jonathan, and I'm with my friend and co-host,
Brian Tom O'Connor.
And we have a guest today, something that I'm looking forward to because I've heard of his work, but I don't really know anything about it. And today we have, I'll try and pronounce his name somewhat correctly, Seye Kuyinu. He might pronounce it a little bit differently, but Seye is a coach who enjoys exploring systems and stories that lead us to or away from suffering. His interests include a quest to explore the nuanced complexities of life, and say his approach to life and work is encapsulated by the knowing that no one ever really knows anything. And so he presents an opportunity to explore and question and learn for absolutely no reason, but for the fun of it. Sounds like a fellow explorer. Welcome to Awareness Explorers, Seye.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's my absolute pleasure to be here to talk to you, Jonathan and Brian. Thank
you. I'm wondering what your ethnicity is and your accent. Where is that from?
Well, I'm from Nigeria. I'm from a tribe called Yoruba. So I usually, when I introduce my name, I start with the singy-songy story about how the language is really a song language. So Seye sounds like Dore, Seye. And if you said it any other way, like Seye, it's a totally different word entirely, or a totally different phrase entirely.
So that's interesting in that, our consciousness is so bound by language, and in different places, there's different languages that kind of have you subtly have a different way of looking at the world, just like a intonation in Thai or in your native language can mean a totally different thing. And I think, when you go into things like how in certain languages there's male and female for everything, that really affects how we see the world.
Yeah, in fact, I remember in elementary school when I was learning French, it was not a compulsory subject. I was totally thrown away by the whole male and female thing. I'm like, why is a table male and a chair female? Like, or vice versa. I'm like, what does that mean?
Right.
That totally put me off French till today.
Right.
I just could not understand it.
And I still don't. I'm not sure the difference between a male chair and a female chair, but evidently there is one.
What's interesting is I learned to speak in German. Well, at some point I worked with a German company and I got curious to learn German, and I picked up the language really fast. And what was interesting about the type of learning I used Pimsleur then is they only focused on the sound to get you to learn, as opposed to the more cognitive, this is what ball looks like, and this is how it's pronounced in the language, and this is what an apple is, and this is what it's pronounced. It goes straight into the sound of things like I can't speak German, for instance. Ich verstehe Deutsch. Go straight to the sound of what that is, and then you learn that way. So it was really interesting.
I also used Pimsleur to start learning Mandarin, although I moved on to other platforms, and that also is a tonal language where, if you get ma, and ma, it can all mean different things.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you about your book, which I think is really wonderful. It's called This Glorious Dance, and the subtitle is Thoughts and Contemplations About Who We Are. And I wanted to ask you how you came up with that title, both the title and the subtitle.
Thank you for that question. I want to say in exploring this this mystery of who we are, when we go through this search for ourselves, one of the things that becomes really obvious is the paradoxical nature of life. So we go on searching for ourselves only to find that we were actually looking for ourselves and we're here. That's like paradox number one. Then we find out that what we have thought is external and is in front of us isn't really in front of us, but it's inside of us. Another paradox. And so eventually we start asking these questions about, good and evil, right and wrong. And eventually it's like, it becomes so obvious that there's really nothing, from the absolute viewpoint, there's really no good or evil. It's part of the one. And so for me, it's as I kept, exploring, I started realizing that what this looks like is like a dance. From if you look from far at the dance, you think there are two people fighting. When you look closer, you see, oh, it's two people dancing. And then when you pay attention to the dance, you realize dance isn't so that we can get to the end. The dance is just a performance, a celebration of the individuality of these two dancers and the oneness of both dancers. And that itself is the beauty of everything. So life to me is it presents itself as that dance of oneness, that dance of that from afar, it looks like there's some separation, but when you look closer, it's this dance of every single thing. And I'll say it's the dance of God. It's a glorious dance.
I like that, our language, going back to that, is so creating things as being separate entities. We don't have a lot of words that indicate systems and parts of one whole. And so we tend not to look at things that way just because we don't have even the words for it. But I like the word dance because a dance obviously it tends to be two or more individuals doing something that is a whole. And I'm wondering how you help people to explore the limitations of seeing things in terms of separate, and instead helping them to see things as part of a bigger system.
One thing that I tried as much as possible to do or not do in my book is as someone who has read so many books on, just trying to understand, spirituality, religion, and all of that, looking for a formula, looking for somebody to teach me what is right. One of the things that I try to do or not do in my book is tell anybody or teach anybody what to do. Instead, for me, it was more about let's explore what isn't so obvious, because it's in the exploring that we actually find. It's not when we are told or when we are shown, we actually miss the point. As a matter of fact, I don't know if it was where did I read it? I don't know if it was part of a Buddhist text that talked about the finger pointing to the moon. I find that the more we try to point to pull people to see the moon, the people are going to continuously look at the finger. But it's when we sit down and start to actually see the moon ourselves, something else unfolds. And so instead, I think my approach has been to, maybe also because I'm a coach, my approach has been to ask questions. So in my book, there are a lot of nudges and questions more than telling people what to do. And I tend to not want to put myself in a position where I'm a teacher or anything.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, there's just the enjoyment, the immense enjoyment of relationships for me, So instead of, in fact, in talking about these truths, I find it's almost meaningless to even have these conversations with friends and family. Instead, I can enjoy the actual non-separateness of myself and others, and or these seeming others, and myself and my environment as one and the same thing.
Mm-hmm. You know, I used to have a teacher in the Gurdjieff tradition, which I know you're now exploring a little bit. He used to say, "Answers kill." And I like that because we'd ask him a question, and he would explore and ask questions, and we'd go on for hours sometimes, and we'd all feel really high, Whereas people who might meet him for the first time would say, "So what happens after you die?" And he would go on to this big exploration. He would never answer their question, and it was frustrating for people, but I remember it being really fun and enlightening and expansive, just as you said.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I've always thought of questions as not having to do with the answers, but the purpose of, especially, self-inquiry and other spiritual questions, is to redirect your attention from out there to in here, to instead of what you're looking at, redirecting it to what's looking. And so when you're questioning, in what is this all appearing? Questions like that, you're shifting your attention, and the answer isn't important as long as the attention gets shifted.
Yeah. I can't give credit enough to Brian, your book, Awareness Games, because there are so many things that for me that got in those exercises. There's so many things that became so much more powerful than answers. Like I can't forget the finger exercise where you have your two fingers and you touch different surfaces. It sounds like a foolish exercise, and I know in the subtext of that exercise you talked about how it was a little bit brainy, but that for me was so understanding that the two fingers have different if we imagine that they feel things differently, but they're on the same surface and all of that, it feels there's an answer to that raises more questions, but you don't say anything, and you're obviously in your book you're not necessarily pointing to an answer. It just raises more questions and curiosity, and then you find that you're in a different place, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's great to hear. That's always been one of my favorites, and but I wasn't sure how people took to it, so it's nice to hear that you did. How did you come to this spiritual? I mean, I know you're an agile coach, and that has to do with, I believe it has to do with technology as well as uh, organization, etc. So how did you? And I also know that you're a musician, and oh, you have something in common with Jonathan. You both practice magic. I'm talking about theatrical magic.
Ah.
And so we can touch on, oh, there you go, you've got your cards right there. Yeah, so that's something both of you have in common. By the way, you also both like dogs, because you refer several times in your book to Milo, and
Yeah.
Jonathan wrote a book called what was it, what's it called,
Conversations with Dog.
Conversations with Dog,
Ah.
about his spiritual guru, his golden retriever.
Dogs
But
make good gurus. They rarely have ethical lapses, so it's nice. Um, so you do magic. You love dogs. We are a reflection of each other. I'm curious. You mentioned before we started recording that you just started getting into a little bit of the Gurdjieff work, and I'm wondering what that's been like for you.
So I'm in the process of writing another book. And the book really centers around contemplative practices. I used to be one who enjoyed meditating. I'd been meditating for years of my life, but in very recent past, I do more contemplation than meditation. And so sitting down for hours just in contemplation has been somewhat of a hobby. I'll put it more as a hobby than I'm not seeking anything. I'm not trying to find anything. I'm just enjoying being, and that to me presents itself as, if someone asks me, what are your hobbies? Music, magic, painting, all of that. I want to say I also enjoy sitting down, you know, and in writing about this hobby, contemplation, I just realized kind of stumbled into it. I wish at some point there was someone saying that wrote a book about the beautiful art of contemplation. So in writing, in trying to put material, doing some research and study of my own, I'm seeing the different contemplative technologies in different faith traditions. And one that I'm in this particular phase of my research, I've been in the more of the Christian mystical space and exploring different contemplative practices, especially as inspired by Cynthia. Her name is Cynthia Borget. I think that's her name. She's a part of, yeah. Oh, you know her.
Yeah,
Yes.
Cynthia Borgo or something like that.
Yeah, Borgo. Yeah, yeah. So she mentioned Gurdjieff. She had a book called Mystical Courage, and she mentioned Gurdjieff, and I'm like, interesting exercises. I wonder what's in there. And then I just fell into that rabbit hole of Gurdjieff. Then I'm like, oh wait, there's actually like a community and all of that. So it's right now I'm just on the path of seeing the different contemplative technologies and exploring them. So that's how I found it.
So a lot of people, when they hear contemplation, might think that you are trying to figure something out, sort of, they might have the wrong idea. How do you define contemplation?
That's, contemplation and meditation are one of those words that are, you can go to a dictionary and get a definition, and then in real life, maybe something totally different. So like with meditation, there's the belief that it's about, shutting the mind. Then you spend years in meditation and like, oh no, it's actually not that. And contemplation, people are like, oh yeah, there's, maybe you have a phrase or a word that you're contemplating on, or you just have things that you're contemplating on. And what I'm trying to do in my book is just explore the variety of and flavor of contemplation. And for me, from a personal standpoint, it's actually just being. It's actually sitting in being, and without agenda, without any expectations, just being. And in being, what I then find is words words come out, thoughts weave themselves out, and there's a beauty in what comes out that I can then, I can bring to an altar, whichever imaginary altar, and then burn and let that go so that I can come back the next day to sit again and just be. So if I bring this back to more of a Christian mystical perspective, it's like spending time with God. And in spending time with God, we see God's face disappears again. And then we come back the next day to look at his face, and then his face disappears again. And then we come back again, his face disappears. And then to me, it's that going back to the Garden of Eden to have the fellowship that Adam and Eve had with the voice that was walking in the garden every evening.
So it sounds like instead of using a phrase or a distinct thing to contemplate, you're kind of emptying yourself out and seeing what from the emptiness shows up and being with that. Is that an accurate statement?
That's actually correct. There's I always tell my dog knows when we say let's go to the lake. There's a bench we sit down by a pond, and we've been doing that for almost a year now, almost every day. And there's no time that my experience of sitting has been the exact same. Yesterday, as an example, and one thing that has been very that's been showing up for me is the dissolution of this of subject object, for instance, being able to see that the perspective that I or that this one here is seeing is just a perspective of the universe. So I'm one together with everything that's that the eye can see. So I'm the eye of the perceived object seeing itself through from one particular perspective. So it's a very interesting way. I'm not able to articulate it properly, but that was like a big takeaway from yesterday. This evening, there's just going to be something else. And I'm not going there because I want to continue what I did yesterday or what I discovered yesterday. I'm just going there with open arms, just ready to embrace this mystery that's all of us.
Yeah, I find that too. If I sit down for meditation or contemplation, if my idea is to repeat what happened yesterday or to make something that's happening now go away, then no dice. It doesn't work out. It's just, okay, what if I just notice what's happening without any attempt to change anything?
Yeah, I make a ritual of doing that every Friday afternoon for 2 hours. I sit with no agenda to see what will show up. And it's two of my favorite hours during the week. You know, the universe tends to fill it if you can just surrender to the mystery.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, you mentioned, Seye, that there's certain questions in your book that are kind of springboards maybe for people to use or think about or start exploration. I'm wondering what some of those are.
So one that I find really interesting to talk about when I have these conversations is the mystery of thought. I think that chapter 3, it was called The Dance of Thought in my book. And I would say there has been a total misunderstanding of thoughts and our relation to thoughts. There has been, to me, it seems almost clear. It's so clear to me that thoughts are a mystery that we have no ownership over. But there's a belief and misunderstanding, a collective misunderstanding about that. So we think that we are thinking, the one thinking a thought. So we want to have good thoughts and dispel bad ones. In fact, if we have bad thoughts, we want to change a bad thought, as if we can actually catch that thought, wipe it, clean it, and then make it a new nice thought, you know. And so part of what I did in my book was ask questions like, okay, do you even know your next thought? You know, or if we can all agree that we witness thoughts, you know, most of us can agree that we witness thoughts, but where do they come from and where do they go? And do they have a pattern? Are they sometimes fast? Are they sometimes slow? You know, so obviously I'm not attempting to answer that question. I'm asking those questions so you pause and actually reflect. And it's in the reflection that we start to see that, oh, their thoughts, then who am I? You know?
Yeah, we identify with them less, and we also have less of a sense that we are creating, we are making everything happen. There's more, and there's a large kind of a spaciousness in which the thoughts appear, and they become, at least for me, just another object in awareness, like body sensations, sounds.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, Brian, if you saw in my book, page 77, what I did there with I think from 77 to 81, there's just like a ticker of the words at the very bottom of the page where you just have this spacious space on
Yes.
the entire book. You know, it's my attempt at visually playing with the whole idea of this thing that just passes within consciousness.
Yeah, that's so beautiful to be able to shift our attention to the space in which the words appear. And
Yes.
as a matter of fact, you do have a lot of space in your book because the prose is alternated by poetry as
Yes.
well, and they're and I think they land differently. You know,
Yes.
one is a little more sort of bypasses the analytical mind, and the other is okay. This is very interesting, you know,
Yeah.
and then this is more experiential.
Yeah, one of the things that towards the end of the later chapters of my book explored things like anxiety, um, explored projection, explored the topic of death, life and death. And some of these were things that were more I've been in more conversation with people. I've explored them recently within my own self, and I wanted to make those topics. I wanted to feature them in my book because I also sat down to. I spent more time sitting down in contemplation of like what exactly is death. You know, what exactly is projection? How do I see the others and how do I see myself? Or how do I see an other and how do I see myself? And it's some of the contemplations became what I had there as poems.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, now that you mentioned it, one of the chapters that you just listed was the chapter on anxiety, which was, I thought, one of the most fascinating chapters. And you, part of it was seeing anxiety as a physical sensation, as
Yeah.
opposed to a thought-based thing. But you in that chapter, you wrote about having a panic attack as a result of failing courses at school. And I thought it would be really wonderful for our listeners if you wouldn't mind going into that briefly and walk us through how you got into it, and more important, I suppose, how you got out of it.
I would say I didn't get out of that one.
Oh,
I didn't get out of that one. That was years, a few decades ago when I was in college. Um, and in fact, I wrote in my book how it had become a recur. That was my very first on recognition of anxiety, and then I started seeing patterns in different aspects of me getting in trouble and then lying, carrying this pattern of lying to loved ones about things that were happening in my life, and in fact, for me everything goes back to that particular incident. So what happened was I'd failed a number of important courses. I was in the Faculty of Medicine in a college in Nigeria, and I'd failed in a number of courses that were going to jeopardize my graduating. And so I'd had to sit down with some of my lecturers to see what we could do about them. But there was one particular one. If I even go into a little bit more details, there was one of the courses where I was supposed to I was supposed to bribe my professor to actually pass that course, and I just couldn't do it, partly because I didn't have enough money for that, and I just lost my dad. So the fear of going to tell my mom that I just failed a course and I was not going to be able to graduate was so intense. And I remember every day my mom calls me to, check up on me. I couldn't tell her that actually there's a problem in school, So I went days and days just in anxiety. And then one day my mom finally calls me and says, what exactly is going on with school? And I had a panic attack, and then she's like, I'm coming to school, and yeah, that incident really ate me up. And I mean, prior to that, there were times when she would call and I couldn't pick up. And I just wanted to do every possible thing to get out of the fear. And part of what I was doing to get out of that anxiety was to create new bad habits, like, spend money that I didn't have, uh, eat and drink things that were actually dangerous for my body, which are just patterns that we create when we are in this anxious state. And so I found that somehow became the prototype of every other anxiety inducing event that's happened in my life. And so a lot of this, to me, it's just really clear. They're just made up in the mind. And if I failed, I could have actually, gone to tell my mom, hey, I failed, and things wouldn't have been as bad as it was for me. So it's just about it's for me, it had become so clear that it's created in the mind, and part of that is the belief that somehow in the future I was going to be extinguished. So there's also an uh, an implicit fear of death, and in the case of this with my schooling at that point, is that, oh, I wasn't going to be able to graduate, which meant that I was going to be poor and die poor, something like that. I'll disappoint my parents, or in this case, I'll disappoint my mom. My mom is going to have a heart attack or something, and then I also lose my mom because I just lost my dad. Yeah.
Yeah. So you saw that they are just thoughts and
Yes.
not real, not necessarily related to reality, but you also saw that they're connected to an instinctual fear of death.
Mm-hmm.
But then later on, you wrote that understanding that they're sensations and you can experience them as fleeting sensations and cultivating a sense of detachment. Have you?
Yeah. Yeah, with sitting with any type of emotion, especially the unpleasant ones, um, I can say from a first-hand experience, what starts to happen is obviously a thought triggers, there's a thought that we experience, then it creates emotions, and then the emotions become feelings, and then it's the feelings that we try to run away from. But really seeing what I notice, at least for me, in on a subtle level, what starts to happen is my hands start to shake. I'm a little bit uneasy. I want to go to the refrigerator. I want to, pick up my phone and doom scroll. There seems to be a translation from that thought all the way to the emotion of maybe fear, anger, shame, guilt. It translates then to the body, and within the body we can see that, oh, okay, I'm shaking. Okay, it's just shaking. It's a chemical reaction. So what I find is it's in sitting with it rather than running away from it. It's in sitting with it that we then start to see something that we quite haven't noticed, is that and it's just energy that's passing. And the more we familiarize ourselves with it, the more we realize it's totally harmless. So then we start to rewind the process. So our feeling of anger, for instance, or the emotion of anger or fear or shame was also harmless. They're just a pointer. Then that goes back to the thoughts that created it in the first place. And then you see, oh, they're just thoughts that pass. So now I may feel anxious. It's just anxiety passing. I may feel angry. Oh, that's anger that just showed up. It also passes.
Yeah, we're always making everything mean something, and often the meaning is negative. Whereas, something like anger, well, it's just sensations moving through the body, just like other sensations. And those things are very habitual. So there's usually not the space like, oh, well, anger. If you were an alien and you got into a body and there was anger, you wouldn't say, well, okay, that's an interesting experience. But we have meaning attached to everything that's kind of habitual, and that creates a lot of our suffering, which need not be there.
Yeah. I go into magic. I got into magic because I was transition. Actually, if I do a little bit of a backstory, I used to be a software developer, and most of my interactions were with my screen, you know. And so I decided to push myself to be more people facing, and somehow that led me to going in the line that I'm in now as a coach. And because I was an introverted person who had very bad people skills and didn't want to be around people, I wanted to find some way to ease people in. And because I enjoyed magic and I grew up watching Chris Angel and all of that and exploring magic tricks and how they did that. So I started learning card tricks and things like that. So I noticed early on that if I was going to be in any type of social engagement, all I had to do was perform a trick. And once I performed the trick, there's, everybody's laughing and cheering. And then suddenly I feel confident. Then I can actually say the things I wanted to say. Or, if I had a lecture or whatever, I can give the lecture because now I feel more confident. And I found out all along, it was just my belief that I had to, impress people before I could actually do the thing that I wanted to do, which if trying to impress someone is yet again another play of thoughts, habitual thoughts. So now for me, it's, who cares if you impress people or you don't impress people? Who cares? Just do whatever you want to do.
Well, I have a similar story there with learning magic to get over my shyness. And though, once you know some magic, it's an interesting thing because it does create a sense of connection. People are interested in it. And it also shows how easy it is to fool the mind. We're always thinking we know what's going on, and magic shows that, well, no, you don't. You had some assumption there that was clearly wrong.
I can't count how many people don't talk to me because they are sure that I'm diabolic. They're so sure. And it's like, and I tell people, if I explain this trick, if I perform the exact same trick, you're going to see exactly what I did. So it's the mind just is habitual in seeing things a particular way. Once you just change it, it doesn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Well, it also makes me think that maybe it's all illusion, particularly separation, the separate me, the separate identity apart from the world and that's why I love self-inquiry and awareness practices, because you start to see that all is in awareness, or everything is made of awareness, and thoughts and body sensations and me and you are all sort of one substance. It's so hard to put into words, but it can really be experienced if you inquire, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the things that deepened my experience is also my hypnotherapy practice. I remember there was a time I was working with someone who wanted to go into weight loss. One of the things you obviously do is ask questions, get to know, their goal and, all the triggers and things like that. And for this particular person, they had a weakness for ice cream. So in NLP and hypnosis, you want to change the modality. You want to find out what they hate as much as they love the other thing, and then change certain modalities in those two things, switch them over. So this person loved ice cream and they hated onions. So what I was going to do is introduce the smell of onions to the ice cream. And it's so weird for me that now it doesn't matter. Like, I did this for this person, but anytime I I see ice cream, the first thing that comes to my mind is onions. So it's like our mind is the mind is so fickle, and can be easily manipulated. How can we then think that the mind is the source of truth? It clearly cannot be.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, we have a lot of similarities, Shaya. I was a hypnotist as well. And it showed me that, if I just had uh, that the mind was limiting me. I remember my uncle hypnotized my sister, who's very shy, to be Mick Jagger. And she got up on a table in front of a bunch of people in our family and started singing Can't Get No Satisfaction. And I said, wow, I'd like to be Mick Jagger. I'd like to be anybody other than me. So what is this hypnosis? And the thing I find interesting about hypnosis is it shows how lost we get into identifying with some story or some person that's different than just being here right now. We love a good story. We love being the good person, the bad person, the movie, whatever. And it's like, people often say, can you hypnotize me? And I say, well, you're already hypnotized. The question is, can I unhypnotize you?
Yep. There's a book called since you know this. There's a book called The Structure of Magic by
Yeah,
Richard. Yeah, and in the book it talks a lot about if I'm not making if I'm not switching this book in my mind, but it talks about how to change personality. So somebody comes to you and talks about being shy or whatever, how you can identify the different personalities and switch different, it's so interesting then. In fact, if you as a professional, if you've done this several times, you begin to ask deep questions about if you are exactly what you thought yourself to be. And it's no wonder someone like Jim Carrey, he played a particular character's role for a year. I think it was a year, and he couldn't find himself anymore.
Yeah. With playing the comedian, what was his name?
I can't remember.
The guy who was on the show.
The Saturday Night Live guy who did the Elvis Presley impersonations.
Right.
Yeah, brilliant comedian. But of course, his name is not coming up right now. But it will at the end. It'll pop in. But
it's an interesting story. He played that character for so long that he lost who he was, and he had to spend a while letting go of that character so he could remember who am I again.
It's interesting because back then when I saw the transformation happen for him, I thought he was actually crazy. But I'm like, oh no, generally speaking, we are the ones crazy. We just hold on to these identities that are actually not even static and say that they are real.
Andy Kaufman, by the way.
Right.
Yes, Andy Kaufman. Yeah.
There was another thing in your book that I really like, because we had a conversation with one of our guests a while ago, Jack O'Keefe, and she came up with a term which I had not heard before called non-denialism. And in your book, you compare, on the one hand, the realm of the relative, where pain and suffering and individual stories are natural and palpable. And then on the other hand, the realm of the absolute, which transcends the individual. And a lot of people who are in the non-dual field really focus on that transcendent part and sort of deny the existence of the relative. But you wrote of the pain and the suffering. They are to be honored. No one should make light of anyone's experiences. I found that very moving and not often talked about.
I remember when I was even writing that part of the book, I was at a cafe with one of my friends, and I paused to more or less celebrate how beautiful life is. Just in that part, there was more of a heightened sense of awareness, seeing, just genuinely happy because I could see that everything around me wasn't as real as I would have uh, before believed things to be. But I was here right across with this friend who um, had or has Lyme disease and is going through a lot of pain. And I know she has um, a relative also going through a lot of pain. And it's oftentimes easy to say our true nature is happiness, but somebody else is not feeling that, you know. And it's it's really difficult to be able to, especially when we are so embedded um, in mind, to be able to point outside of to point to what mind is and how we really are not in mind. We are the one that witnesses mind. And when awareness latches on so tightly, it almost feels impossible to detach. But yet, I still say that even seeing the absolute itself is not separate from the relative. And so with recognizing the relative, we can actually be with the relative because it's one of these, I feel like a lot of people who say come into non-duality we all want to stop suffering, and we think that we're probably going to get to a state or a phase where your emotions are only peaceful or only heightened in this like bliss and all of that, without realizing that within the world you're going to experience emotions. The only difference is you see those as fleeting. They're passing. They're not as real as we thought them to be. And so in a lot of ways there's still, if I put it still in relative terms, there's still a purpose for each of these negative emotions. Now, in seeing from the absolute, we can see that these relatively painful, uncomfortable things, they're actually, when you look, really pay attention to them. Yes, anger or pain or suffering, it can be labeled as suffering, but when you go deep into it and look at the fiber of suffering, you find something else that's there. And it's not called suffering, it's something else. you know.
You really you dive into it and you look at it and you drop the strategies to make it go away and you discover, just as you said, the
Yes.
fiber. Yeah,
Mhm.
beautiful.
I'm wondering if there's anything that we haven't covered that you want to talk about, or anything, Brian, that you got from his book that you have a question about.
Well, I have pages of notes, and many, many questions we're not going to have time for. So I'll turn the question to you, Seye. Anything we missed?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't. I don't think I'll throw myself questions in this scenario, but I think just like the intentionless intention that I had for my book, which as much as possible, one of the things that I was trying to communicate in the book is to say that I, I wrote the book from an outpouring of wonder at this, I call it mystery with a capital M, this mystery that is experiencing and that's being experienced. If there's anything that I am extremely that I'm passionate about, that I love to express, is that maybe life is not what we think it is. It could never be what we think it is because thinking is not as it's not as real as we think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's some life itself should be celebrated, and in the celebration of life is really in the coming back to ourselves. And in fact, if I use this analogy a lot, I go to the movies a lot of times, not necessarily because I want to watch a movie, but there's an excitement for me in hearing the sound design, in seeing what went behind. Like, wait, what did the cinematographer do there? Or how did they color grade this part? And then I see the emotions of the actors and how they're playing their role. And I'm baffled at how they perfectly nailed that scene. And I'm intrigued by the writer of the movie, how he chose a certain phrase instead of another phrase to articulate the beauty of that particular scene, or to see the arc of the movie, how it started with this guy who was just watching TV in his house, and suddenly the movie ended with him being lost in Tokyo. Like, how did all of that happen? It's the seeing the context of everything, not the content of everything, the context of everything. I think that's the sweet spot. And that's if I would express and ask anyone who's listening to spend more time in, I think that's the place to be.
Yeah, well said. And as with movies, so with life, seeing the subtlety, the amazement, the uh, just how multi-leveled it is in interesting ways is really fun. I hear
Absolutely.
you have a meditation to lead us in, and now would be a good time to hear what that's like.
Yeah. So this will be obviously a Gurdjieff contemplative exercise. And this was I think this one was made popular by one of his students, Adi, in 1980. I can't even remember the name of this exercise, but this has been really interesting for me. So before we go into the exercise, I'm just going to give a little bit of cues here for what's to come, especially for the listener. So the exercise is prescribed as a 15-minute one, but I don't think we'll use 15 minutes for this. I'll make a few modifications to the exercise by pulling in a few lines inspired by my own recognition of myself as truth, as well as a few suggestions that I've learned from my own practice as a hypnotherapist. There are going to be three parts to this exercise. So as if anyone is listening to this driving or doing something else, maybe you can come back to this part. So in the original exercise, the first part, or the first 5 minutes, is supposed to be with the eyes open. Then the next 5 minutes is with the eyes closed. Then the last 5 minutes is with the eyes open. But if you're familiar with any Gurdjieff practice, there's also something that he prescribes as body rotating sensing, that you sense in this particular case while you're doing the exercises. You're also bringing attention to, in this case, the right arm. Then after a while, the right leg. Then after a while, the left leg. Then the left arm. Then the area of the sex organs, the spine, the solar plexus, and the head. So in body rotation sensing, we'll be directing attention to awaken a sense of aliveness in each specific body part, while at the same time allowing that part to be the full container for attention. So with that being said, I would just guide us to this with our eyes closed. Bring attention to your right hand. Now try not to see or feel apart from the right hand. Just bring attention to the right hand. Now you're not trying to feel or see anything from the outside, but I'm inviting you now to gently feel in from within. Now, notice how under the beckoning power of your attention, your arm seemingly, it seems to come online. Directly connecting to your arm. You feel its vibrancy. Feel its vibrancy as a vitalization of your own being. Now, that same right arm, isn't it amazing how you can use this mysterious power always at your disposal, your attention, to fill up your hand with sensations? And those sensations increase the direct experience of your own aliveness. Now, bring that same attention to your right leg, the entirety of the right leg. Feel the aliveness from within of the right leg. And also bring attention to, move that attention to the left leg, the entirety of the left leg from the buttocks to the soles of the feet. Notice as if you have presence with full presence, you may or may not notice some sense of judgment. Am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? Don't force anything. No need to put any force. Just do without efforting. Now bring attention to your left arm. Let the attention be exactly as it is. Even if this doesn't feel perfect. What is perfection? Bring your attention to the area of the sex organs. And then let that attention gently move to the spine, the entirety of the spinal cord. And you can do it. Feel the spinal cord. And it's so easy to bring that attention to the solar plexus, the area almost midway the abdomen. And then bring that attention to the head. Your attention moves sequentially to each part. It also stays put there. If you see yourself wandering, daydreaming, judging, return to the direct sensation of the body part you're attending to. And this flow from the right hand to the right leg to the left leg to the left arm to the sex organs, the areas of the sex organs, to the spine, to the solar plexus. We're going to do that throughout the entire exercise here with our eyes open and closed when I direct. So that rotation will continue with whichever prompt. The essence of this exercise is to divide one's attention, to balance it, and to avoid tension and effort. And this subtle effort is totally different from the ordinary idea of effort. But it's simple, it's easy, and it's fun. You try your best, you'll miss the point. So continue bringing your attention to the different parts. And however you triangulate this, from the left, from the right arm to the right leg, to the left leg, to the left arm. As soon as you sense, you can sense each of these parts. You let go and move to the next body part as you listen to my voice. If you are here, present, alert, and aware as the observer of your experience, see that all of reality is one. So a subjective outer and an inner fantastic worlds are one. It is between the realities and the fantasy of both our inner and outer world that awareness develops. And you're developing this sense of awareness. Now, let's open our eyes and we're going to continue the body sensing activity, but with the eyes open, you're going to look around your room or wherever you are, continuously looking at every object within your area without letting your gaze stop at any object. You're continuously moving your eyes and your head, receiving impressions of things external to you. Just keep rotating your head and your eyes, seeing objects, but not staying on any of the objects. So again, feel free to rotate your head as you gather more impressions from your surroundings. As this continues, we maintain our body sensing and rotation. But we do not cease from regarding our surroundings and all objects that our eyes see. At the same time, we're not labeling, we're not naming, we're not judging. You notice, and I'm sure you can, things we see seem to have no significance as we do this exercise. We do not possess them, do not understand them. From this, we could understand that we are always caught, always held, always identified with what we see and what we project onto what we see. Just make sure that your eyes don't stay on one position. You see that we project what we see, creating for ourselves an unreal world of fantasy, of possession, of demand, of hate, of lust, of irritability, of endless appraisal and criticism, and of judgment. And now looking at our surroundings, they seem to be different from usual, separated from us. We do not understand them and can only understand them from a special kind of effortless effort. And we can continue to sense ourselves and at the same time receive these impressions external to us, receiving them without identification. So the final part of this exercise, we'll close our eyes and stay still here. And now we're going to relate to the inner scene, the inner scenery. Once again, don't forget to continue the rotation, the sensing rotation in your body. Notice how thoughts and associations cannot proceed as they usually can. So sometimes you may notice that thoughts are a little bit more still or a little bit more agitated. Notice the sense of judgment. Am I doing this right? Am I going to understand this? How is this making sense? How is this going to work? What does this do? What we need more than anything is to understand what we are, not the judgment. And recognizing what we are, all the moments of waking, which we do have, are seen clearly. So seen that we realize all things and all things all along are not essential to us. We realize all along there's a joy that cannot be defined, that's not found in any forms of attachment. Now, in this inner sensing, I'll ask a few questions that are really pertinent, really important, but shouldn't be dwelt on for too long. What is the aliveness that is you? No, don't try to find an answer. Feel into that aliveness. We went through this exercise of bringing attention to different parts. What is the source of this change in attention? What is this ability to know what we are? I tell you, you do not exist. You do not exist. But can you prove me wrong? Wouldn't you be here to prove me wrong? What is that you that exists? What is that you that is here to exist? As your attention goes from thoughts and to judgment and to getting lost, what is the center of the attention? Without imposing thoughts about what or who you should be, what is left? Without imposing thoughts on who you think you are, What is left? Aren't you bare, naked, your whole self untouched? Your whole self untouched. Your whole self untouched. Your whole self untouched. Your whole self untouched. Unstained by sound. Unstained by impressions. Unstained by thoughts. Unstained by belief. Unstained by touch and sensations. Unstained by perception. You stand apart from all of this. But you cannot deny the knowing of these thoughts and these sensations. Who is the knower of the known, if not you? Oh, not you with a name. No, not you with a body. You, the one who knows the name and who knows the body. I'm going to count down from 5 to 0 in a few moments. This exercise, this meditation will be over when I count to 0, not before. 3, 2, 1. Feeling relaxed, feeling centered, feeling alive. 0. This meditation is over.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I loved how that's structured, because it's starting with the experience, and then you ask the questions about the direct experience we just had. And then you ask the deeper questions about who or what is having that experience. I just thought it was a beautiful progression.
It sounds like a Brian O'Connor.
It does sound like Brian.
Maybe that's why I liked it so much.
Seye, if people want to know more about you and what you do, is there a website or something that they should go to?
Yes, there's SeyeKuyinu.com, and I've started doing a lot more writing on a Substack, SeyeKuyinu.substack.com. So I write a lot about
and how do you spell that?
So SeyeKuyinu.com.
There's probably not a lot of people sharing that particular name, so that will make it easy for me.
And the Substack is a different site?
Yeah, well, it links. There's a link from my website, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There's a link from all my my music, my websites, my photos, all of that is on SeyeKuyinu.com.
Great. And your book is This Glorious Dance.
Yes, This Glorious Dance, Contemplations about who we are. It's also available on Audible. So for anyone who would rather listen to some of the musings, yeah, it's there too.
Great. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, and brought up a lot of unique perspectives and ideas, and I'm sure our listeners appreciate it. And to our listeners, keep exploring.
Keep exploring. Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. We'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link on Facebook and with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.